The White House and mainstream media peddle misinformation to obscure Joe Biden's comments on Trump supporters. The Supreme Court enables states to clear non-citizens from their voter rolls. And voters in Bucks County, Pennsylvania are allowed to re-enter early voting lines after having been blocked by uniform officers. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Wednesday, October 30th. We have 6 days until we decide the fate of the country. And last night, President Joe Biden caused controversy for his choice of words when referring to Donald Trump supporters. Listen to this.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization is seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Here to discuss all of this is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Kevin Roberts. He's the president of the Heritage Foundation. So, Kevin, I mean, these are the comments. Everybody is talking about them. So what do you make of the garbage out there?
Gosh, Jill, in my adult life, I've been called garbage yesterday by the President of the United States, deplorables, irredeemable, a clinger to guns in my Bible. That, by the way, happens to be true, as it is for a majority of Americans. All of that to say, we are the ones who are accused by the radical left of using dangerous rhetoric when all we're doing is trying to reform the centralization of power in D.C. They are the ones who are guilty of this. It's total projection. But the good news, Jill, for those of us looking forward to returning to normal in this country, I think it's going to backfire politically, and it's already doing so today.
Yeah, Kamala, came out and clarified the comments. So say more about that. I mean, how do you think this is already playing? What do you mean it's going to backfire?
It was backfiring within an hour or two of President Biden saying it. By that, as you know, Matt, Vice President Harris was giving this supposedly great speech in Washington, D.C. How telling, by the way, that she would initiate her closing argument in the imperial city, as opposed to doing so, say, in a regular city with ordinary Americans. But that issue aside, at this exact same time she's giving that speech, President Biden does what we think is a mistake or an accident. Who knows? It could be purposeful. But the point is, by the end of the news cycle last night, that was the story that the President of the United States was calling half of the country garbage. It really overran the vice president's speech. I'm not sure there was anything in that speech in terms of substance that was new, other than to say the vice president continued this week-long, I think, purposeful effort to be using a lot of dark rhetoric. Interestingly, what has happened 24 hours in is that the American people are drawing the conclusion, these people do hate us. They do not want us to have any political power.
Well, and the lines are very clearly drawn this election cycle. And I've heard a lot of people of faith saying, I don't know, maybe I'm going to vote, maybe I'm not going to. When it comes down to it, is this just the most critical election that you've seen for people of faith this time around?
It is in my lifetime. I'm exactly half a century old. Every presidential election is important. As you know, Jill and Matt, I've spent some time studying history. I can come up with a lot of examples of presidential elections that really were pivotal for the future of the country. This one in our lifetimes, I think, is at the top of the list. And this is the reason why. It isn't just about the centralization of power in D.C., although that would be sufficient enough. It's that the radical left has moved on from merely having differences at the margins regarding taxation, regarding foreign policy, regarding the role of government and the individual. They're actually wanting to redefine the human person as an example. And rather than change their mind, which would be good as it relates to transgender ideology, they not only double down, but they demonize those of us who would be so radical as to suggest that boys are boys and girls are girls. This is the bottom line. If the radical left prevails in this election cycle, we're going to be combating in a political sense, not just the centralization of power and higher taxes and a terrible economy and ridiculous foreign policy. We're going to be combating people who have redefined the human person. Just as one example, we're going to be combating people who, at least at the state level, maybe even at the federal level, are going to try to legalize abortion all the way up until the 9th month. And finally, as someone of faith, and I guess sometimes people refer to me as perhaps a leader who speaks about religious liberty, certainly something I've tried to do in my career, I really do fear for our ability to worship. Wherever we go to church, whatever our teachings are in our respective churches, I really do believe it's not hyperbole to say that religious liberty is endangered if the radical left prevails in this election. For all of those reasons, people of faith really do need to study the issues. I can't make endorsements because of the tax designation at Heritage, but what I can do and state very plainly on the issues is that when you combine or you compare what the left wants to do versus what the right wants to do regarding religious liberty and all other issues related to people of faith, I think the choice is pretty clear.
Kevin, I have to bring this up because it's so important right now. And it's something that I know you've argued about, I'm sure, over the years, probably publicly as well as privately. But that is this. I have some friends who remain friends, who I have given up trying to make this argument to because they don't like a certain personality so much that they refuse to vote for him. And the way in which they argue this is that as a person of faith, they just can't cross that bridge and vote for certain people that they really don't like, right? And it's odd to me that, I mean, I don't even know how to make that argument anymore, right? I don't even know what to say, but what do you say in those situations?
You know, I've been having that argument with certain friends, perhaps some of the same people, Matt Peterson, since I had hair. And perhaps the fact that I don't have much suggests that I might be losing the argument. But all kidding aside, I would say two things. The first thing is we're electing a president, not a pastor. I told that to the national religious broadcasters. I should say suggested that to them as friends a few months ago in Nashville. And I think that was well received, not because of the messenger, me, but because of the message. It's true. But the second thing is, and I think this really leans on one of the most beautiful parts of Scripture, one that's certainly motivating for me, and I pray about often because it reminds me to try to stay humble. And that is the parable of the prodigal son. If, in fact, there is someone in this race with whom you agree for the most part on policy, but there's something about that person that you find disagreeable, that doesn't sit well with you, that perhaps that person used to issue mean tweets or uses rhetoric you don't like, how about we put ourselves in that particular story of the prodigal son? For those of us who are Christians, that not only might be any of us, it is by definition each of us, according to human nature. And maybe praying on that over the next 5 days could be helpful for people who right now are sitting on the sidelines.
That is a fantastic final word. Kevin Roberts, thanks so much for joining us today.
Y'all are the best.
Thank you so much. We'll catch up with you soon. When we come back, Chris Bedford will break down the Harris campaign and the final push coming up to Election Day right after this. It's the best thing that comes to my door every single month. It's goodranchers.com. You can make a powerful choice about what you want in your food. It's going to be American meat for me and my family. And when you look at it, you're not only just going out there and getting the meat from American farms, but you're supporting all of the local ranchers and ensuring that you receive the high quality American raised meat. And it's not going to have the antibiotics, the hormones, or any of the seed oils ever. And when you shop at goodranchers.com, you're going to make a statement about the kind of values that you stand for. It's hard work and dedication to the American tradition. And right now, you can get part of their presidential promo. So for a limited time, you can get a free add-on for a whole 4 years, which is good until the next election. So that means whenever you subscribe to any of their boxes, you decide if you want extra chicken breast, extra ground beef, or smoked bacon, or wild-caught salmon in your order for 4 years. And it's the perfect way to ensure that you have high-quality American meat in your kitchen, and every cut is pre-trimmed and individually packed, so you don't have any of that messy meal prep or poor storage packaging. Good Ranchers helps you get the most flavor and value out of every ounce of meat that you buy, and right now in this economy, that matters more each day. So don't miss out. Use my code Jill to claim this presidential promo with over $1,200 and claim $25 off your first box plus free express shipping. And bring 100% American meat to your family meals until 2028. It's goodranchers.com, code Jill. Goodranchers.com, American meat delivered. Kamala Harris's campaign has had an interesting run, as Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford put it in his latest Beltway brief. It went from brat summer to Adolf autumn. He joins us now to discuss this bizarre trajectory. So, Chris, what do you make of Harris's campaign tactics down the final stretch?
I think it's the stupidest national campaign of my lifetime. I've never seen one run so off the wall. At first, without the excuse of COVID, they skipped interviews. They skipped public appearances. They wouldn't even let the VP out there because he couldn't talk about any of the policies because they weren't going to share the policies. This is after they skipped the primary. Now, that part, at least to me, made sense. I didn't think a last-minute primary would be good for their chances. They ended up with a candidate no one wanted. Then they tried to play catch-up, where they just waltzed her and waltzed him into interview after interview they were completely unprepared for and unpracticed for, aside from the debate performance, where she did pretty well. And then you just had the messaging the entire time, that kind of like extra viral, tongue-in-cheek, gay Instagram, TikTok influencer-driven strategy to try and it's the kind of thing that might excite kids who are in college, but it's not actually going to gain back the voting blocks. It's not the sort of thing that would get Barack Obama's coalition back together. And remember, I think they're trying to copy some of the pop culture things that popped up around Barack Obama, but those were done by his fans, not by the campaign itself. Those were signs of his successes in the popular culture, not a main driving force. And over again, they've drilled down on the Hitler thing, and I get it. It's not about convincing independents necessarily. A lot of it's about trying to drive voter turnout. And Democrats have been able to do really well in the polls ever since 2016, 2018, 2020, 2022. Democrats did really well with the Hitler thing, but it's been worth less each time, just getting them by a little bit less each time, maybe holding the ground. And I think a lot of voters have moved on. And any actual scientific, real, expensive measure of what voters care about confirms the age-old axiom that it is the economy, and right behind that is the border. Every moment they're not talking about that, they're not doing well. And since the Dobbs decision, too, Donald Trump as Hitler is significantly less important to a lot of Democrat female voters in particular than abortion. So on the one hand, they are spending money. The super PACs are spending money. The more serious people, I think, are spending money pushing the economic message, pushing the abortion message. But Kamala Harris is still up there doing January 6th. And then, of course, there's good old Joe Biden, not invited to the party, but he's crashing it anyways, absolutely screwing the whole thing up for her. It just seems like an incredibly weak finish. And listen, this might end up proving my thesis wrong. My thesis, we talked about in the show, being that in retrospect, most political races are obvious. But it seems like this is kind of obvious. They're just doing a bad job.
Chris, I mean, it really does make you wonder, would it be even worse the more time they have? I mean, would you just keep digging a hole? But as it is, I mean, can you discern any closing argument other than talking about this joke about Puerto Rico? And what should that argument be, in your view, in the time remaining?
If you dig into the information in the states, you dig into the ads that are playing, you can discern a more intelligent, more traditional closing argument about Donald Trump is going to give tax breaks to the billionaires and not you. Donald Trump is bad for the economy. It will crash. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden create jobs. Donald Trump will not allow you to kill your baby. Things like that. But on the national level, in the media level, in D.C., in the speeches and in the rallies, no. They literally do think, and they're so excited about it. You read about it in Playbook, Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, ABC, CBS. They think that they finally got Donald Trump. And this is the dumbest part of all. Because a comedian who he's not even pictured with, who was on the stage hours apart from him, made jokes that Jon Stewart thought were kind of funny, but didn't go over too well with the crowd. Really, probably shouldn't have been there. That they're going to call racist. If you haven't been able to convince the American people to not vote for Donald Trump, because even when you're calling him a racist, then calling someone he doesn't know, but who's somehow tangentially associated with the campaign racist, that's not going to change it either. It's kind of like when they tried to impeach Donald Trump over Russia, that didn't work. They went with Ukraine, which was even more obscure before the war. If you did basically before the war and the impeachment effort, if you didn't play Risk, you didn't know where Ukraine was unless you're from that part of the world. They keep on just getting more and more and more obscure, more and more off message. They came back for a moment to Hitler, who I think most people know. That seems to be the only history lesson that they actually understand. There was slavery in America. That's the only one where they know slavery existed. And there was Hitler, and he was bad. They don't really understand any other aspects of it. So at least that made a little bit more sense. But it's been failing to move the polls. Their super PACs have been warning about this. Their major super PACs have been warning about this. And no, I see no real unified message, just a whole lot of college Democrats screaming.
Bedford, I'm always yellow, and I always try and take over Australia first when I play
Smart.
a risk. And that's why I know where Ukraine is. But what our good friend and colleague Steve Deace always says is that when elections are about personalities, Democrats win. And when elections are about issues, Republicans win. But this year, if it's all personalities on the Democratic side, nobody likes Kamala Harris's personality, right? The more that we see it, even down this closing stretch, the more they don't like what they're seeing, and the odds keep going more into Donald Trump's favor. So what's your response to that this time?
Well, yeah, I think Steve's got a good point about history, but largely that's because Republicans have run such bad candidates. I mean, you didn't really have great Bob Dole, George H.W. Bush. It was easy to fall back and say, well, listen, we're smart, but you can't fit it on a bumper sticker like a Democrat's message where you run them against Bill Clinton or Barack Obama versus John McCain. That makes sense. But if you break it down here, Donald Trump has got someone who's got more personality. And it's not just that. Democrats' issues are more convoluted and more stupid than ever, more difficult to explain. Now it's actually easy for Republicans to explain some of their messaging now that it's gotten a little bit more populist. They'll say, bring jobs back to America, make America great again, secure the border, build the wall. Those are all very simple bumper stickers. Democrats' bumper stickers read what? Republicans want to stop gender identity suppression amongst children and to deny you access to life-saving care. It's much more difficult for them to explain those issues than it is for Republicans, which is why you've started to see them actually just kind of chimping off of a lot of Republicans' issues, repeating them. No tax on tips. It's a great thing for Republicans. It may make a difference in Nevada. And then at the end of the day, through no fault of their own, remember, they tried to run the last Bush in 2016. They were afraid here. They tried to run DeSantis. A lot of Republicans in D.C. were very excited about that, who's been a hero on conservative issues. But the personality, not so much. If he had been the nominee, Steve would be arguing that point again. It's not about personality, it's about the issues. But Donald Trump makes all of this so different. He's campy in a way. He's fun. He makes fun of himself. He's from like another time. That campiness, I think, kind of defangs a lot of him, despite what Democrats try to do. And at the same time, his issues are more explainable.
Chris, we have to talk about Biden. You brought him up, and this really cracks me up. I mean, a friend signaled me last night, and he said, do you realize Biden is Gollum, referring to the character in Lord of the Rings who's bad, who's corrupted, but because they keep him around, he inadvertently saves the day at the very end. And there's part of that to me that rings true right now because he's Donald Trump's best friend, whether he intends to be or not. So what's your take on the garbage people, the garbage comment? Because, man, that was just a gift out of left field.
I was shocked they allowed it to happen. I guess this is why they were not allowing Joe Biden to come to any of the rallies. They want to pretend like they like him and they care about him. Meanwhile, he is stewing in the White House. They literally just threw the closing speech rally in his front yard and did not invite him. So maybe there's something in the back of his head that's saying, you know, I don't need to stay on message. I'm sure he's not getting briefed on what the campaign would like him to say. He's just sort of doing his own thing. And despite his best efforts, he is technically the most powerful person on the planet. He still has a megaphone. He can still hop on a Zoom call like he did right there. He's never been particularly artful with words. Also, let's not forget that despite that he's senile, and despite the fact that he's really cultivated an image of a really condoling figure, a really good grandfatherly figure. I've been in DC now for over 20 years. Joe Biden has been a jerk, like a massive, massive jerk for half of a century. The kind of guy who will stab you in the back, the kind of guy who will say real mean things under his breath and then pat you on the back when the cameras come around. Someone who is vicious, someone who, when he thought he wasn't going to be in office, which was all he really craved, decided to make deals with corrupt foreign governments with his idiot son. He's really excellent in an old school style way of slapping you on the back and just being Grandpa Joe. But behind the scenes, he says mean things. I mean, he said that Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, two of the most milquetoast, awful Republican candidates of my lifetime, were going to, quote, put y'all back in chains. He said, if you ain't black, or if you ain't voting for me, you ain't black. So it's not surprising he thinks that half the country is garbage. And Democrats keep on saying, well, this is the guy who actually goes out and talks to Republicans. Yeah, maybe. He's still got an old school style, but he's made it clear for decades in his high-tech lynching of Clarence Thomas on down that he is willing to do anything for power, and he really does think half the country is garbage.
But Bedford, even if he was briefed, would he even remember it? Hey, we need you to stick around with us because we want you to explain why early voting was shut down too early in a Pennsylvania county. Don't go anywhere. We've been breaking down the election for you the entire show, and we know that it's about so much more than politics. We want to secure the border. We want to make sure our communities are protected. We want to know that if a natural disaster hits, the federal government is actually going to show up. So first and foremost, we need you to go vote on election day, if not beforehand. But on election night, we need you to be a part of BlazeTV. So you can join me and everybody else at BlazeTV, all of our hosts, Chris Bedford, Matthew Peterson. We're all going to be a part of the 2024 presidential election night. So we're at a crossroads, and we know that the future of the nation right now is going to be decided in real time. But this is your chance to be a part of something amazing. BlazeTV is going to have boots on the ground all across the country. Our correspondents are going to be delivering the pulse of the night straight from where the action is happening. So what we need you to do is subscribe so you can experience this pivotal night with us. Because at BlazeTV, we're going to tell you the truth. There's not going to be any spin, any filters. We're just going to break down what's really happening in real time, and we'd love to have you join us. So go to blazeelection.com/BNT and get $40 off. It's blazeelection.com/BNT for $40 off.
I'm proud tonight to tell you that the Trump-Vance campaign has just filed a huge lawsuit against Bucks County for turning away our voters.
Let's get into election integrity now, because a woman in Allentown, Pennsylvania was arrested after she told Republican voters to stay in line. She went and posted on Facebook and said, I was just arrested at the government center in Delaware County for encouraging Republicans to stay in long lines and vote. Please do not get out of line. Do not let the Democrats discourage you in staying in that line. But Chris, we get the afternoon update here from Jack Posobiec on X, and he said, we just won in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The judge ruled that Josh Shapiro's buddies violated the state election code by blocking people from voting with uniformed officers. We all saw the videos. Early in-person voting is now extended until 5 p.m. So why were these people out there just cutting the line short in the first place, Chris, in Pennsylvania?
Well, it was active voter suppression. And right now, all we know is the police officers who were sent there, who made arrests, who blocked people. And I'm really curious. I actually have our reporter reaching out to the governor to talk to us and the attorney general of Pennsylvania to talk about this. I know the Biden DOJ is not going to do anything about this. A Democrat judge has said votes were suppressed here. That's why they elongated this. Now, Bucks County is an interesting spot just outside of Philadelphia. It's always been divided long before Donald Trump between kind of the good middle class and upper class liberals and what they refer to as Pennsyltucky, which is the more country guys and the more Republicans. They refer to them derisively as that. Now, this is a county that Donald Trump almost won in 2016, but didn't. I think he lost by 1 point. And then in 2020, he lost by 4 points. So it's not a reliably blue place. But apparently, someone looked at these lines, looked at this turnout, saw something they didn't like, and decided to do what this Democrat judge has ruled was voter suppression. Someone gave the order. They can't hide behind that. I mean, we're talking about the Department of Justice is trying to put people like John Eastman in prison for years and ruin their lives over talking about these elections. And here you've got in Bucks County police who have been ordered by someone to go down there who's putting them to voting. It really needs an investigation. The good news is they're not all powerful. We're seeing this now. Democrats are not actually able, but we're seeing sign after sign after sign that they are willing to push the limits in any way they can. You see it with the federal government at this moment, which is refusing to share data with states on who is a citizen and who is not. So we've heard for the last 6 months or so, since literally our first show on the air with Blaze News Tonight, that technically the federal government and the Democrats are claiming you're not allowed to vote if you're not a citizen, so there's no reason for laws protecting it. Now the federal government won't even share that data with the states on who is a citizen and who isn't. They're pulling out every stop they can. And fortunately, thank goodness, it looks like at least in a couple places here and then in the Supreme Court, there's a willingness by judges this time around to call out shenanigans and not always be intimidated by the nearness of these elections.
Yes, because I fear that we are just in the beginning of a deluge of these things. We're going to be talking about incidents like this between now and through Election Day. And they're starting to come in from all over. Also in Pennsyltucky, where, by the way, my parents live, an area I'm very familiar with, a great part of the country with many patriots living there. Also in Pennsylvania, we have this ABC local affiliate. Did you see this? Everyone's been talking about this, where they mistakenly, quote unquote, air the election results in Pennsylvania. Apparently, Harris wins by 5 points. We'll all be watching to see if that happens. The station said the numbers were randomly generated and displayed, in error as part of a test. But the air about us is such that people are freaking out about it. What do you make of that?
It's more about the air than about the station. That's the thing that folks need to understand about this is it's not a machine. It's more of a living organism, was the way that one former corrupt Democrat explained it to me in 2020 about how the elections work. There's no one in the center giving orders. There's no one say, you pull this lever, you pull that lever, you do this, and here's the number we're going to get to. It's more like you don't need to consciously think for your heart to beat. You don't need to consciously think to turn on sweat when your body's overheating. It just reacts that way. People know to push the boundaries here and there. It's a cultural thing. Like how Barack Obama didn't order Lois Lerner to target conservative organizations. She just knew that that was probably what she ought to use her power for, that it was tolerated, and that it would generally be approved of and likely not punished. Turned out, thank God, she was wrong in that case. But there's many such cases as this. So there's no secret place where they already know the numbers and they sneak it over to the graphics team at a local TV station, but it feeds into this paranoia, and it's worrisome because I think the Republicans have actually done a good job of turning voters back on who were very unhappy with the process, who felt like their vote was not taken seriously in 2020. Donald Trump kind of fed into that feeling for a few years, but has done great work, and the RNC has done great work to get early voting culture into the GOP, to get people back to the polls, to try and tamp down on that dissatisfaction and this I'm going to stay home feeling. And people still need to do that. But it's just like we talked about last night, and I think I've been seeing it spreading around more. It's not enough that your votes are counted properly for democracy to work. People need to believe in it. And this is on trial right now. Democrats are doing everything they can to change and rig it, and Republicans just need to push through it. And it doesn't mean that it's over. It doesn't mean that this whole grand experiment is over. A number of wins, a court that's actually willing to take it seriously, which is what we're seeing right now. Republican Party as people willing to take it seriously are huge. There's been a couple states like Florida, because they had the whole Bush versus Gore thing, who have been careful over the preceding decade or 2 decades to make sure that their voter rolls are well cared for. But other Republicans haven't taken it seriously. They've thought it was conspiratorial stuff. Now they're seeing it. Now they're waking up, and they've just begun to fight.
Well, you talk about the importance of people believing what is out there. I want to move over to Colorado, because when you look at the voting systems there, the confidential passwords were posted to the Secretary of State's website for months before they were taken down. But the Secretary of State said, oh, they don't see this as a full security threat to the state. They're just going to change the passwords out of an abundance of caution. So how does something like this happen, knowing that people are going to be keeping a very close eye on these systems heading up to the election this time around?
Well, I'm not going to give her the benefit of the doubt. This is the Secretary of State. I mean, there's always incompetent people who make silly decisions on tech, but you have here a Secretary of State who fought like hell to get Donald Trump and keep him off the ballot. She doesn't get that benefit of the doubt. You have to assume that she's up to no good, that she's someone who will do anything she can to keep power. And it's the kind of thing that sometimes you have to envy the American left for. They think they're on the side of righteousness, the right side of history, the Arc of the Rainbow and Martin Luther King and all this and that. And it's just their willingness in the service of that to do anything they can to try and defeat people shows a viciousness that you would find out of line with an American elected official, a willingness to commit crime. I don't know if there's a crime here. I don't know if this was just some kind of goofy mistake. But given her history and what she's been willing to do to put democracy aside to stop Donald Trump, it's worth investigation.
So one thing I want to throw out there to both of you is that we've had Cleta Mitchell on this show quite a bit, right? And I don't know if you've seen this New York Times article where 400 hours, I mean, this is disturbing, 400 hours of Zoom meetings talking about election integrity, they have access to, and God knows who else has access to them, because the New York Times is very much on top of and wants to label her some kind of weirdo, right, for doing real election integrity work that I think the vast majority of people recognize as credible. So it's very interesting that at the last minute, I'm curious your thoughts, all of a sudden we're going to get these attack pieces about anyone who's been working against these people, is a bad guy.
And that's why people haven't wanted to put their neck out there. People like Cleta, people like Hans von Spakowski over at the Heritage Foundation has been doing this for years. PAN Inc. wasn't really interested in this stuff. There's no corporate sponsor who's going to give you millions of dollars to your dumb PAC or your nonprofit to do that, because corporations often don't actually care who wins. They just want to take care of their little chunk of pie, and they'll give to either party for it. So it takes actual hard work by people who are intelligent and are not going to get sucked into conspiracy theories or this or that. At the same time, the system is broadly against you. I mean, Fox News lost half of its worth, essentially, in a lawsuit because hosts were willing to ask questions about Dominion. That's completely insane. It's got a chilling effect. It makes it so that people don't even want to push back. How dare you question the computer? Computers don't blunder. It's psychotic, but that sort of thing makes it so people are less willing to engage. But I do actually think that over and over again, there's been so many people who are pushing it. It's no longer just Hans and Cleta alone, that it's more of a movement, and it's more difficult to knock off, more difficult to ignore. And finally, the courts are taking it seriously.
Yeah, they're going to attack and ridicule until they hopefully on their side would say, we can get these people to stop talking. But thankfully, we have people on the right that actually do care and have been pushing forward. Bedford, tomorrow is Halloween. It's a good Tucker Carlson costume that you have on today. I look forward to seeing what you come with tomorrow.
Oh, it's going to be the greatest costume you have ever seen.
It better be. Thanks so much, Bedford. We'll talk to you later.
See you then.
When we come back, we'll break down a suspicious video. It has a busload of voters being dropped off at a polling center. Just ahead. In a recent post on X, Alex Jones shared a video that allegedly shows non-English speakers voting in the Pennsylvania election.
No, they had these people, they had about 12 of them walked in. They were all foreigners. And then they took them up. These younger people helped them to fill out they say vote PA today. Yep. And then they took them up and somehow they beat a 2-hour line.
Here to discuss is Todd Bensman. He is a senior national security fellow for the Center for Immigration Studies. So, Todd, what do you make of this video when you saw this?
Well, my first thought was, we don't really know who these people are. I mean, they may not speak English, but as far as we know, they may be eligible to vote. But what we do know is that many states, I'm not sure if Pennsylvania is one of them, offer driver licenses to illegal immigrants, people that they call undocumented non-citizens or whatever you want to call them. And in the applications for these driver's licenses, they offer a register to vote button. And all you got to do is click on it and fill it out and you're registered to vote in a whole bunch of states. So I do think that the election is at some risk of people running in there and trying to stuff the ballot boxes illegally. It is a federal crime. Illegal immigrants are allowed to vote in some super blue jurisdictions in local elections, and there are different proposals for that. But federally, they could be prosecuted and thrown out of the country. I hope that they know that's out there, that information is out there, but who knows if in any of these jurisdictions that the feds want to use up, federal resources investigating things like that. We want them to, of course, but they may not want to. So I don't really have the whole story on that. That's not my report. That's an Alex Jones report. I watched it. It looks bad.
Yeah, Todd, this is just the season right? We'll get all kinds of reports all day long. I can predict between now and through Election Day when it comes to this sort of stuff. Nonetheless, we know that it's real and that a lot of naughty things, happen this time of year. So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, one of the biggest things that I remember used to be standard operating procedure for anyone in politics was to absolutely deny that any non-citizens vote. Right up until recently, really. I mean, I feel like the mainstream right would not admit this either. Can we put a number on that? I mean, a percentage for non-citizens who may end up voting in elections?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that the Heritage Foundation put up a website where they are collecting data on election fraud and fraudulent voting scenarios across the country, cases that we know of, but I'm not sure that they break it down by citizen or non-citizen, that sort of thing. It occurs to me that I have seen cases, though, where they have been caught voting, that they were not supposed to be voting and that they have been caught voting in small numbers. But, in a tight election like this one's shaping up to be, small numbers matter. So I don't know what would possess illegal immigrants to come out in large numbers to do this at such great risk. They say they live in the shadows and that kind of thing, and they're looking over their shoulder and that sort of thing. But I wouldn't put it past vote harvesters to arrange some kind of operation where they're bringing people that are not eligible to vote to stations and paying them afterwards. That's what vote harvesting is. A lot of the cases on the Heritage website are vote harvesting cases where they abuse absentee ballots of the elderly or the sick or the dead, harvest them, fill them out for their candidate, get paid 10 or 20 bucks a piece and turn them in. That sort of thing happens.
Well, Todd, I see that you're in your office now. The last time we had you on the show, you were down in southern Mexico. So I need to ask you just the immigration update. Can you give us an update on that caravan that was trying to make it here before Trump gets elected?
Right. So, I spent a week down in Tapachula, which is the very southernmost city in Mexico, right on the Guatemala border. And what I found down there is the result of about 10 months straight of a Mexican military operation that Biden-Harris arranged to improve the election optics at our border. You know, it looked terrible having all those thousands of people crossing in December, and they couldn't brook that for another full year of campaigning. So they got the Mexicans to bring the troops out and haul them all down there and trap them in a kind of an enclave, like kind of almost like a Gaza Strip down there. And so I was in the middle of that, and there were thousands and thousands. I mean, it was incredibly crowded down there. The people are trying to, the government actually is trying to move them to other cities in Chiapas and Tabasco State, and they're allowing those caravans to move between cities. But they're still trying to keep most of them south for at least another 2 weeks. I mean, they've got to just hold the line. You know, I mean, you can't have in the week before the election and the American election, thousands and thousands now start to cross. So those caravans are mostly going into other cities in Chiapas. I traveled with one for a full day, and it was not going to the U.S. border. It was going to another city. They're going into Mexico City. But man, let me tell you this. I interviewed many, many dozens of immigrants, and they are absolutely panicked that Donald Trump might win and close the border before they can get in. And they are pushing, pressing, looking for any opening in the Mexican cordon down there to get through. And they're starting to break through. We're starting to see more and more immigrants illegally cross the border. They just are desperate to get in before Donald Trump would win an election.
So Todd, I mean, what's going to happen then this week? I mean, do you predict once the election is over, does the border just burst again for a while?
Man, I really hope that I am dead wrong on this, but I am predicting a human wave, a huge wave of humanity. Once the Mexicans just say, okay, we did our part. We held them back during the campaign. The campaign is over. We helped Harris get elected, or whoever, if Trump gets elected one way or another. I can't imagine that they're going to want to continue to hold back this unrestful, pack of, I mean, there are hundreds of thousands down there. Nobody knows really how many. 150,000 alone just in Tapachula, the most I've ever seen. I've been down there quite a bit. I've never seen it this packed, crowded, and man, they are just aching to get out of there, and the Mexicans are aching to let them go. That is a combination for a human wave of humanity, just a wave of humanity after November 5th sometime. Maybe it might take a couple weeks. If it's Trump, they know that they'll have about 10 weeks before inauguration. And I can't see that the Mexicans wouldn't want to just clear the lines, clear the pipelines down there. I mean, it's crazy what's going on in their southern provinces.
Yeah, Todd Bensman, we'll have to have you back on with an update after all that. Thanks so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Don't go anywhere. We'll have final thoughts next. Stay tuned. We are 6 days away from the election. We do the countdown every day here on the show. And I can't believe, Matthew, that we're under a week to go. It seems like it's taken forever to get here, and it's also happened very quickly at the same time.
Yeah, we're in this time now where it's just surreal, right? Everything starts to go almost in slow motion for me, and it's just sort of surreal. This is, everything that the last 4 years have been leading to.
I want to make sure that we highlight what Kevin Roberts, the president of Heritage Foundation, was saying on the show today, that he thinks this is the most critical election for the people of faith to make sure that they go out there and vote. And there are some still that are sitting on the sidelines saying, I don't know, is this going to be a time that I do go out and vote? What's your message?
Oh, I agree with him. I mean, there's really, it's the most critical because of what's at stake. And what's at stake is religious freedom, persecution for the sake of your faith, and an anti-religious fervor on Kamala's side. This is probably the most anti-Catholic, for instance, presidential candidate we've seen in our lifetime. So I don't understand how, you know, if you don't like Trump, okay, that's fine, but you're not voting. It's not a popularity contest, it's not a virtue contest. You're not voting for a pastor. This is just the lesser of two evils. If you know,
when you look at the Democrats, it seems like their final push is, we love abortion.
yeah.
And you're Nazis, or now today, garbage.
This is why, for me, it's not even
That's
lesser.
it.
For me, it's not lesser of two evils, right? But for someone who's sitting there who's still up in arms about they don't like Trump for whatever reason, to me, it's like, this is just obvious, right? It's clear where they stand. It's clear where the other side stands. Clear what's better for the sake of, you know, the churches being able to help people live out their faith. Bottom line, period. That's it.
And I think it's pretty clear to the two of us that we're just going to continue to get crazier stories every day between now and Election Day. And it's important to know that that is going to happen and to remain calm and be level-headed, because it's all built in at this point. That's not going to be shocking when something happens.
Yeah, look, the whole point of saying volatility will increase is so that you realize, look, we're going to get all these reports. Some of them will be fake. Some of them won't be, about election interference and what's going on at the polls. Both sides are going to ramp those up as soon as someone sees anything, right, related to this for the sake of their own side on Twitter. It's going to start going viral. They're going to push it. What we know is that a lot of crazy stuff will happen. We'll sort it out and find out what that is. And we also know that there's a great chance that after Election Day, it's not over because of what the left has already planned, right? In terms of, we have to count the votes, and also in terms of the legal fight that will ensue, and potentially the constitutional fight that will ensue about electors and certification and yada, yada. So when you know that, it's like, okay, focus on what matters, which is finding people and bringing them to the polls along with yourself and getting your grubby little soul out there to vote.
I'm going to continue to be encouraged until Election Day, because you have one of two choices. You can be discouraged or encouraged. And I'm just going to be encouraged until proven otherwise. But one of the things that is going to stick with me after today's show is when we had Todd Bensman on, and he's saying, down there in the one city that I was in southern Mexico, there are about 150,000 people that could be rushing the border if Trump wins on November 6th.
Look, this is unbelievable, but yet very believable. You look at what's happened with millions of people coming across the border in the last few years, and he's not joking. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of people that have been held off by Mexico, and regardless of who wins, are going to want to jump over as soon as they can. So I would pay attention to that and keep that in the back of one's mind, because I think he's right. So
you're saying no matter what, on November 6th, through January 20th, we're still going to have plenty of things to discuss.
Yes. So prepare yourself mentally for that. Don't freak out. And we'll all go over the waterfall together.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. We're all going to be in this together. So at least we have that to look forward to. Be sure to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform. And we'll be back to break it all down tomorrow night.